David, we've got a lot going on today. Welcome to phase two, David.
Well, when I saw that comment when you Skyped me about phase two, I was wondering if you're talking about my phase two or your phase two, because I've got a phase two. But anyway, you explain, and it's good to be with you, Jason. You explain what your phase two is, and then maybe I can explain what my phase two is.
Sure. Phase two, I don't know if it's phase two or phase three, but basically the first phase here, David, was I wanted to improve the quality of the broadcasts by increasing the resolution, increasing the audio quality that everybody gets to hear. And so people have seen that happening over the past couple days and weeks. And part of the issue was I had brought in a new computer. You know that episode of, I guess it's Bugs Bunny, where Daffy Duck or somebody like that, Porky Pig, checks into a hotel room and there's a mouse. So he calls down to the desk and they send up a cat. Then he's being irritated by a cat. So he calls down, they send up a dog. Then they send up a lion. Then they say, so I kind of got into a little bit of that. I had this faster computer, but it was running much hotter. So then the fan came on and then that was making noise and people were complaining about the noise. So I went to great lengths to eliminate the noise, but that required more computing power. And so then, you know, it was this never-ending problem. But what I've done now, David, I've constructed two custom-built computers, not very expensive. A lot of people told me that I should go out and buy this new $50,000 Apple Mac Pro. I can't afford that, David. $50,000. I've never bought a car for $50,000, let alone a computer. So I got these low-cost computers that I was able to build myself that have passive heatsink cases, so the computers are totally silent. Listen for a second.
Beep, beep.
Yeah.
Beep, beep.
All you can hear is the refrigerator. So, David, how are you today? That's a better question.
Well, yeah, no, I'm very well. As I say, it's good to be with you, and I give you a quick introduction to my phase two.
Yes.
For years now, and the hours of interaction that you and I have had, which I think have been incredibly productive. What we've been doing, although we haven't used that terminology, is doing a vector analysis of news stories being released by the BBC or CNN and comparing what they say happened or what they want us to believe happened with what must have happened at the particular crime scene or fatal event, consistent with the laws of physics. So now up on the screen, so I've got now on our website, on my website, Reverse CSI Scripts, I've got a link where it says free downloads. Right? Now, free downloads, you will be able to, or any of our users will be able to download the banner of the website, which I think is an astonishingly effective method of communicating historical and technological continuity over 100+ years, right back to the Boston Tea Party, where the Boston Tea Party took place in 1773, and I'm alleging that is a classic and early example of a high technology live action role play, because it would appear that the Carpenters Company of the city and county of Philadelphia, together with a guy called John Hancock, who apparently was a pirate and a smuggler and a tax evader and generally an all-round bad person, right? And captains of the British East India Company, I believe, conspired together to arrange for an incident where tea was thrown into Boston Harbor. Eventually, that triggered the Independence War, the Declaration of Independence, and the mercantilists of the United States of America were able to get out of paying taxes to George III, all right, and get into extracting taxes from a rather bullied American public for themselves. So now that group of individuals are now amongst the wealthiest, and their descendants, etc., through these two secret societies, Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, are the most wealthy and powerful people in the world, leading us into what David Rockefeller said, I believe, the world is ready to move to a supranational government of an intellectual elite and world bankers. And the modern live action role play, I believe, took place on 9/11 on the 49th floor of the World Trade Center, building number 1, where Serco shareholders met to stage, I allege, a live action role play that would culminate in the mass murders of targeted communities, for example, the firefighters, 343 dead firefighters, or the World Traders, worship company of World Traders, at Cantor Fitzgerald on the top of the tower number 1, with 685, I believe, dead, including the brother of Howard Lutnick. So if you can just go back to the banner and blow the banner up, I'll just look at the sort of the high points on that banner. So remember now, folks, you could actually download this banner, right? And you could, I would love to think that you would find it sufficiently enticing to frame it and put it up on the wall. So any subsequent discussions, at least those discussions that relate to live action role play resulting in high value target or mass casualty events that where you feel it's useful to listen to Jason and myself, you can understand the historical and technological context from that banner. And very briefly, on the top left, there's a man called John Harrison. John Harrison died in 1776, and he was the inventor of the marine chronometer, which kept time to an extraordinary level of accuracy for ships moving at sea. And he was awarded, even though he had to fight for it, the Admiralty Longitude Prize, which I think was 20,000 guineas. He had to fight for it, and ultimately George III had to intervene and make sure he got his money.
Is that a lot?
Now,
20,000 guineas?
Back then, it's huge. Because you think of the advantage for the Royal Navy and the British East India Company's ships to know the time precisely when they're, for example, fighting the American decolonial forces, right? Or Napoleon in Trafalgar, because the enemy ships don't know the precise time. They show up at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the British Royal Navy or the East India Company can cut a swathe through those defending organizations for ultimate victory, where the British East India Company got to be the world's largest and most powerful corporation the world has ever seen and will ever see, because when they attempted to disband it in 1845 or something of thereabouts, where Queen Victoria's advisors, they had 260,000 men under arms, Jason. This
That's
was
amazing.
a monster, a giant.
Yeah.
Right? The key technology, and notice I use the word key, was the marine chronometer, pioneered and invented by John Harrison, ultimately improved until you get to 1848 on that banner, and you'll see the clock outside Greenwich. Incidentally, the Greenwich Maritime Museum is the most extraordinary example because they show the prototypes put together by John Harrison. So that, I think, was patented in 1848, extraordinary piece of technology. And immediately down below it on 0 longitude is a clock that is actually labeled the Zulu clock, which is tied to time generated by the cesium fountain clock at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington, which to this date, plus improvements, I believe is the most accurate clock in the world. It's accurate to 1 second in 186 billion years. And my argument that I'm developing, and I believe we can share with our listeners, is I believe now we can show them how to do a vector analysis of a live action role play event that results in the death of, for example, Michael Hastings, or Princess Diana, or John Bennett Ramsey, or JFK, or Abraham Lincoln, right? Because again, so what I'm saying is in 1776, when these, if you go to the left-hand side of the banner, the bottom row, you'll see 2 Greek life societies, Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, which I believe are the engines of what I call the Carbon Kappa Syndicate, right?
You know, David,
Where
this is really interesting because, I mean, this is another example of one of these things that when you say it, some people might think it sounds over the top, it sounds ridiculous, but this actually makes a lot of sense. So we've got all this turmoil going on in the world. The British colonies are trying to break away from the monarchy. That's a big deal. And this company, the British East India Company, it's risen to such levels of success, it actually challenges sovereign states, right? I mean, these are sort of unheard of circumstances prior to industrialization, and building ships and creating companies and things like this are all relatively new. So now when we look at modern times in the context of what you've just laid out for us, the internet and all that was as much of an uncharted new territory where you could conduct business around the world in ways that you never could before. It's a bit of an analog in certain regards. And we see these companies like Amazon.com becoming so huge, taking over industries, changing the landscape of cities. I mean, when I walk around New York City now, there's so much retail closing, I think because of Amazon.com. And now what's happened is Amazon.com has started buying retailers. They bought Whole Foods. They have their own bookstores now. So just within maybe 5 blocks of this apartment, there's something like 3 or 4 Amazon return centers that I know of where you can buy stuff over the internet and bring it there to return. So Amazon is changing the landscape of New York City, perhaps in similar ways to the Dutch East India Company back at that time.
Fantastic metaphor. I totally agree. So with this forensic analysis or vector analysis I do, I like to see where did the money come in to fund Amazon's growth, right? It came from investors. The top 10 institutional investors in Amazon include Vanguard, right? One of whose directors is a woman called Amy Gutman, who's Phi Beta Kappa, right? And of course, the other investor is BlackRock Inc., whose CEO is Larry Fink, who is Kappa Beta Phi, right? So I'm saying the 2 biggest institutional shareholders.
Ooh, sorry, David,
Amazon.
look at this. Vanguard has like a Dutch East India ship.
I was going, wonderful, exactly. And you know what? That's an 18th century ship of the type used by the British East India Company to trade into, amongst others, Boston Harbor, carrying a load of tea from China, right, where the 3 ships were attacked by a group, I believe, led or directed by John Hancock. And my question is, how did they synchronize the attack? Because this would be, I guess, a black ops by any means. But if you wanted to attack 3 ships, I believe some of the sailors on those ships would be armed. That is, they're perfectly capable of resisting people who come aboard, trying to steal the ships, the tea, and throw it into the harbor.
Yeah.
But they didn't shoot. Why didn't they shoot? Right? Because I believe, this is a theory, and this would be the beauty of doing a vector analysis. So our listeners, our supporters, our fans, if you will, they can download this 2-page document, right, which is entitled The Free Download Template for Licensed Vector Analysis. I'm very verbose, of third-party CSI scripts where patent custodians have staged live action role play. And as I'm saying, the first live action role play in modern times for me was the Boston Tea Party. And the insignia that is issued to members of Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi is a key.
Yeah, you
right?
told me that.
That key, I believe, would go into the marine chronometer precision watches. And what it's a signal to the people who are members of Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi is, if you join us, right, we will be able to tell you the precise time to launch, for example, the demolition of building number 7 in New York, or the attack on the Pentagon of 9/11.
Yeah, they even call them keys. They say the Phi Beta Kappa keys.
Well, it is a key, and you see that shaft that's coming out of the rectangle, right? The old keys are hollow. That is to say, they fit over the winding shaft of a marine chronometer. This to me, it's a breakthrough a couple of days ago. I said, damn it, what these people have been issued with in forming what David Rockefeller described as a supranational government of an intellectual elite and world bankers, they've been issued with keys which will tell them the precise time to launch an attack on people like you and me, including, for example, the movement, I allege, of a genetically engineered coronavirus that has now been engineered on a spectrum between being just a virus and being just a vaccine to something in between. We're using reverse genetics. This is the phrase in the patent taken out by Pirbright Institute, co-funded or partly funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? They've developed, I believe, or I allege, a hybrid coronavirus or a virus that is part vaccine and part virus, and the precise ratio of whether it's a vaccine or a virus is engineered by artificial intelligence algorithms so they can target communities, right, based on the metabolism or the diet of the targeted community. And I'm alleging that the people who live in Wuhan City, who allegedly made great use of a wild animal market where civet cats and bats and stuff like that would be eaten, absorbed into their metabolism would be certain, I think, genes or enzymes that might make them vulnerable to a tuned or customized virus that would represent a huge threat to the Chinese government. Because if that were true, if that were to be true, they could say, well, we're going after Wuhan City now, but next city could be Shanghai, right? So you pay your carbon tax or we'll kill you. And hence I've coined this phrase. You remember you were very kind about my capo di tutti cappa phrase. You said that was concise, and anytime you say I'm being concise, my ears prick up because I'm not by nature concise, right? But I thought, let me just put that in front of the audience. If this scam of the idea that God's gas, what I call God's gas, carbon dioxide, is the principal component of catastrophic anthropogenic global warming, right? The only thing they can do to us is kill us, because you absorb or breathe in carbon dioxide at 380 parts per million, which is the ambient percentage or parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Jason, you breathe it out an unforgivable 40,000 parts per million. So now back to Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi. I think these are two secret societies which, because of the privilege of hindsight, we're able to recognize, but JFK was not able to recognize. In his speech to the Press Association at the Waldorf Astoria in 1961, he said, "We are opposed by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that believes in guerrillas by night and not armies by day, and infiltration and not invasion." And I think he was describing the combination of Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, which today, was it
We just
disconnected? I just saw the sign coming up, disconnected.
Still there. Yep.
Oh, okay. So let's go fast forward to what relevance, and I watched President Trump.
But wait, you were telling us that
Mike
JFK,
Pence,
it was the combination of Kappa Beta Phi and Phi Beta Kappa? Is that what you were going to say?
I think, now, he didn't declare that, right? My inference is when he, the President of the United States, to be assassinated in 1963, describes he says, we are opposed, that's the American people and the American government, right? We are opposed by a ruthless and monolithic conspiracy. Now, to oppose America, there's got to be an organization out there that fits that description by JFK. He's not a fool.
I think people probably thought he was talking about communism at the time, right?
Well, yes, but communism was never, it may be certainly ruthless, but not monolithic, because there's a million shades of communism. Marxist, Leninist, Mao Leninist, everyone in the socialist community fights each other. And ultimately, the socialists are up to their arms in blood, right? But anyway,
Were you aware of
backing
this
up here.
speech, David, in 1961 when it was made, or no?
No, subsequently, and I've heard it, and he speaks it's a very, very eloquent and profound speech, but he doesn't recognize the identity of the ruthless and monolithic conspiracy. So I perhaps arrogantly claim I do, or we do, because if you agree with me and our listeners, going back to the
David? David?
almost by happenstance.
We're getting some disruption on your end of the line there. Can you hear me, David? David. David, you still with us? Connection interrupted, trying to reconnect. Okay, let's see where we can go with that. Hopefully David rejoins us shortly. See, I can make all the upgrades possible here, but I can't control what's going on at a guest's location. We'll give it another minute for David to come back and join us. Hopefully it's just a little network load there at his location. We're going to be starting our sponsor-exclusive broadcast in just over 30 minutes on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, as well as patreon.com/reverse-CSI-storyboards. So David just disconnected, but everything is still working here. So hopefully he can come back in and join us. Let me try texting him. Although if he's off the internet, that might not work. He should just come back in. Let's see if we can get him here. Yeah. We might just end it here. So David, yeah. No, I know. Everybody's got us coming through. We lost David's signal for some reason. I guess his apartment, the internet went out or whatever. So let's see if we can get David back. You know what? The text isn't going through. The internet must be down in his location. So here's what we're going to... Hey, Rod, let's hope that didn't happen. So what we're going to do is we'll end it here for now for... YouTube, and hopefully by 2 p.m. David will be back online in Vancouver. Maybe he can get to a cafe or something. And we'll be back at 2 p.m. with David Hawkins' Discovery CSI. And if people are not yet sponsors, please visit Patreon and Subscribestar. I can't keep these shows coming without your support. And let me go get David back, and we'll be back in about 30 minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.